Good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of Epic Insight. My name is Ian Bernhard, and I'm a sales consultant at Epic, and I will be your host today. Women control more than half of the personal wealth in the United States and about 80% of spending decisions. That makes them a financial force to be reckoned with. But for many financial advisors, as well as those working in any client relationship capacity, unconscious blind spots and biases can make it harder to connect with women as prospects and clients. With today's Epic Insight, we delve into the topic of meeting the needs of women investors. This session reviews the basics of women as a financial force, lays out research and key steps to meeting women's needs, and outlines practice strategies to use in your everyday interactions. To help us walk through this important topic is Laura McDowell from Charles Schwab Asset Management. Laura is a director of family office at Schwab Asset Management. She is responsible for educating family offices on the firm's investment solutions. She's also responsible for delving into practice management and value add content to the advisor and investor community on topics such as women in investing, raising money-wise kids, college planning, and behavioral finance. As a reminder, your line will be muted throughout this call, but if you have any questions for Laura, please enter them in the webinar control panel, and we will address them at the end of the session. With that, I will turn it over to Laura.
Thank you so much for having me today. Really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for that warm introduction, Ian. I just wanted to start with some gratitude by thanking all of you on behalf of all of us at Schwab for the trust you place in us and the partnership you have with my colleague, Carrie Corbett in Schwab Business Services and my colleague, Joe Raga with Schwab Asset Management. Those are privileges we don't take lightly, so thank you so much. So I want to engage in this discussion with you about how we as an industry can better support, encourage, and empower a base of investors that arguably has not been inspired and reached by our industry in a truly meaningful way. Now, this content is approved for CE credit, so make sure to stay with me for the full session, as your presence for those 50 minutes is required to get the credit. And equally as important, I have a lot of great information to share and a passion for it as well. If you do have questions, as Ian mentioned, please submit those. Would love to take those as those come in. And the way we are collecting CE credit today is through a link that Chris and Ian have provided in the reminder email that I believed you received either this morning or last night, and as well as the handout section of the technology platform. So the survey link is going to ask you name, credentials, email, all of which is required for us to submit on your behalf first to the CE boards for both CFP and CIMA. And you do need to fill that out by end of day today in order to get that credit. And even though this should be a simple task, I know everyone is moving a million miles a minute, have a lot in their mind, so I'll remind you at that 50-minute mark. So thanks so very much for this opportunity, and let's dive right in. So as Ian mentioned, should be no surprise, right, that women control a significant and growing portion of wealth and either currently are or will be responsible for all financial decisions at some point in their life. So our discussion today will really center around how we can better relate to female investors by understanding how women tend to differ from men in their approach to investing, communication, and relationships. Because understanding these differences can help us more effectively shape conversations and interactions with our female clients and prospective clients. Now, I am a big believer that by sharing stories, we can really build a sense of connectedness and an understanding with one another. So I just wanted to take a minute to share why this topic is just so very important to me. So I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, about 4,000 residents. Neither of my parents are in financial services. And while my parents taught me important money values at a very young age, teaching me the value of a hard-earned dollar as they put me to work at the ripe old age of 8, and instilling really smart saving and spending and budgeting decisions, we never really spoke about investing or what our family's money situation was. It was actually somewhat ingrained in me from a very young age that it's not really right to talk about money. Now, fast forward to college, and during the summer going into my senior year, I had an internship with the Commission on the Status of Women, which is an NGO with the United Nations. Now, at that time, I was also writing my senior thesis on the microfinance movement in Latin America from the perspective of how microeconomics and microloans affect local communities, specifically women in those communities. Now, what stayed with me from both of these experiences was that financial independence, right? And an understanding of the use and the growth of financial capital at its core is really about providing choice in life. And I believe this to be true, most especially for women. Now, until I was a part of this industry, I always thought investing was a form of gambling, and it was only for the wealthy. My first day in the industry at the age of 21 was the day I learned the difference between a stock and a bond. Everything I learned about investing, I learned on the job. Now, I've come to realize through countless conversations with other women that that frame of reference I had about the financial services industry and about investing in general is rather widespread, and most certainly so with women. I've had women from every demographic and every life stage express how they feel overwhelmed and misunderstood as it relates to the financial support they are receiving and the financial information they are consuming. And I get that feeling because I was one of them. Now, this is a problem for our industry we all need to help solve, because more and more women are becoming our sole clients, and it's not just through joint households, it's through starting and selling a business, through independent wealth creation, the list goes on, right? So your success as an advisor literally depends on your ability to help transform this mentality so many women have about our industry, about what we do and who we do it for. And I know from those countless conversations how engaged women really want to be, but they haven't necessarily felt at ease to be. So I'm really on a mission to change this narrative, and I'm hoping to bring all of you along with me. Now, there's no doubt, right? We're in the middle of a big change to economic, cultural, and social norms we can't ignore. McKinsey published a comprehensive report titled Women as the Next Wave of Growth in U.S. Wealth Management, citing this unprecedented shift in assets by the end of the decade. Now, you have baby boomers today controlling roughly 70% of investable assets of American households. Now, 2/3 of those assets are in joint households with a male and a female partnership. Now, given research has shown that women outlive men by an average of 5 years and tend to marry men who are roughly 2 years older than they are, generally joint household assets are largely passed to the surviving spouse, right? So as baby boomer men age and pass away, more women than ever will be in the sole control of arguably one of the largest wealth transfers in our lifetime. And that's a financial power shift we just haven't seen before. And now I know the stats might be different across channels, and every firm I speak to says it's not the case for them, right? Every advisor I speak to say it's not the case within their practice. But research still shows 70% of women switch their wealth relationship within a year of wealth transfer. So if we do not continue to evolve in how we are reaching and empowering all individuals, especially those underserved by our industry, we're missing a massive opportunity, especially with women. So I really have 3 main objectives for our discussion today. First, I wanted to highlight several important findings from the vast body of research that has been done on women investors to really set the foundation for our discussion. And then I'd like to address how generational, unconscious, and gender bias can create roadblocks with our clients and prospects instead of really being kind of identified and thwarted to create more meaningful engagements. And then third, Schwab really is fully invested in the success and the growth of our industry and strongly believes that for advisors and asset managers alike, women represent a huge potential for not only new investable assets, but they can be incredibly strong centers of influence and referrers. So I do want to share our learnings as an organization, really committed to helping women create meaningful investing success and to help you move your client gender diversity efforts forward. So let's start by discussing exactly where women stand today. Now, in case you didn't know, currently women already control approximately 51% of personal wealth in the US, and women make up half of the current workforce. Now, on top of those powerful numbers, over 80% of consumer spending decisions are controlled by women. Now, research done by Morgan Stanley, published in the fall of 2019, predicts that 45% of prime age working women, so that's going to be mid-20s to mid-40s, they will be single by 2030. Now, in case anyone isn't surprised by this, that would be the largest share in US history of prime age working women, which only solidifies projections that women will control an increasing share of the nation's investable assets. Now, more women than ever are taking part or already making the majority of household financial decisions. So this, in combination with that baby boomer wealth transfer, equates to potentially controlling 30 trillion in investable assets in the next decade. Now, this is not to say that women are on a level playing field quite yet, and that's really what we need to collectively change. The data is still showing that women on average are 25% less confident than men when it comes to their financial picture and understanding. Now, this 25% is when the same knowledge level is demonstrated between men and women. So women actually reported being 25% less confident about their knowledge when they tested at the same level as their male counterparts. In other research, when women were asked a series of questions about finances where they were given the option of answering do not know, they answered way more incorrectly compared to when they were not given that option. So this pervasive lack of confidence and this second guessing of their innate abilities really can lead to inaction, disengagement, and detachment if we, as their advisors, aren't connecting investing in a way and in a language that is meaningful and empowering to that individual. Now, the data is also very clear in that younger women tend to be less constrained by gender stereotypes. Now, with the magnitude of this data actually showing 70% of millennial women say that they currently take the lead on all financial decisions compared to 40% of baby boomer women. And this is an important piece of research that we need to take note of. Now, I can tell you from personal experience that my husband and I, we definitely feel less constrained by kind of traditional gender stereotypes. We absolutely divide responsibilities, of course, but they don't necessarily fit into that traditional gender framework. Definitely less so than I've observed and the research has shown with the baby boomer generation. But when I think about it, I grew up with completely different social norms and laws than my mom, for example. I purchased my first home when I was 29. Completely on my own before I was even married. Then I think about my mom when she was that age. My mom needed my grandfather or my father to co-sign in order for her to get a credit card, because as a woman, she couldn't even apply for credit on her own until 1974. So that experience is shocking to me, right? It contrasts greatly to my experience. So of course, that generational experience and my unique generational experience are going to form this completely different lens in how I move through the world versus how my mom moves through the world, right? And most certainly how we approach our finances. It's so interesting to me though, because I feel as if millennials are the most talked about, but when we really drill down into the data, especially what I've just laid out here, it makes a clear case that widows and Gen Xers will be the ones who inherit first. Now, with women gaining ever greater financial control and responsibility, it's clear that advisors who do want to grow and thrive really must make a dedicated effort to attract and retain more women as clients. And the reason I'm saying it's a dedicated effort is because women do tend to approach investing in finances differently than men do. And let's just be honest. For most advisors, most practices, for a very long time in the financial services industry generally, our content, our communication, our marketing has been geared towards men. And frankly, it's worked just fine when men were our primary client base. But for many women, investing isn't simply about the pursuit of wealth, it's about finding wealth-life balance. And that is a big mindset shift from how our industry has typically depicted investing. See, women tend to view investing as a life skill, not a competition. Women also tend to place a high value on not losing money as opposed to beating the market or their neighbor's stock picks. Women also tend to be more risk aware. And I'm going to come back to this a bit later, but I want you to take note, I said risk aware, I did not say risk averse. And whereas a plethora of research has shown that men tend to be overconfident, women tend to self-doubt more often. Now, these views that I just laid out, they ultimately shape actual investing behavioral differences between men and women. So research has continued to show that women tend to invest for the long term. They tend to diversify, invest based on facts and their values. Now, when I think about an ideal client, I have to admit, right, a lot of those traits are pretty appealing. So there's a really important lesson in this research that women need to hear. Women are generally hardwired with tendencies that really work in our favor when it comes to investing. Yet research continues to show time and time again, our lack of confidence can be debilitating. More women need to know that so many of these inherent traits that we have lend themselves to being good investors. So it's our responsibility as financial professionals to share a story, share an article, share some research, help show them the power that their involvement in their financial health and well-being can have, right? Cognitive framing or reframing with our clients can really have a profound effect, especially on our female clients and prospects who often have preconceived notions about what their investing experience or their experience working with you might look or feel like. I'd encourage you to try to find ways to reframe someone's internal narrative through an article or an image, right? That is going to help shift a false narrative and see the difference it can make in helping to shift those initial confidence levels and comfortability. Now, while it is incredibly important, right, to have the context of generational differences that have been reported among women or to understand the investing tendencies of women that work in our favor, all this research does not mean that we should be making assumptions about an individual woman's knowledge of investing, her goals and priorities, or whether she personally feels overwhelmed about her financial situation. Because women are by no means a monolithic group. We all navigate this world in a unique and different way from one another. The way I process information and the lens in which that information gets digested is unique to me. And the way any of you process information is unique to you. So we must focus on the whole person and not jump to conclusions based solely on one's gender, which really makes it all about how can we better reach the individual. So one of the big hurdles that we need to work through when we think about reaching the individual is managing unconscious bias. Now, at Schwab Asset Management, we've developed a roadmap for helping advisors and their clients identify behavioral biases. Our CEO of Schwab Asset Management actually holds a doctorate degree in decision sciences. So that bias lens is one we are acutely aware can have powerful insights, and we actually incorporate that into our asset allocation work. Now, when we think about how behavioral biases can work against us when it comes to investing, similarly, unconscious bias or implicit bias can work against us when it comes to connecting with people. See, unconscious bias are social stereotypes about certain groups of people as a way for our brains to kind of categorize the social world. Our brains need to process immense amounts of information quickly. But what happens is, in order to do that, our brain creates these mental shortcuts so that it helps to ease that cognitive burden. But these shortcuts, they often lead to biases because we extrapolate what we know to be true in a given situation to other situations that may seem similar, but they're not. See, biases are somewhat inherent in how our brain can kind of move through the world at the pace that information is thrown our way. Everyone has them. But what can differentiate an exceptional advisor and a competent advisor is not the performance of the portfolios they manage, but the ability to identify the unconscious biases that they have so their interactions with all of their clients can lead to more meaningful connections and an understanding between themselves and the person they're trying to reach. So I thought I could kind of bring this concept to life by sharing a few personal experiences as it relates to unconscious gender bias. So I'm sure you're all saying to yourself, right, Laura, of course all women do not have the same needs. Yet, this is a common bias that pops up in our day-to-day. Asking conversational questions and not transactional questions is going to help you avoid the trap of unconsciously expressing this through words. For example, instead of assuming a woman has children, wants to have children, or possibly unintentionally hurting a woman actively working through fertility issues Why can't we just reframe that standard question that we always ask of, do you have kids? To open that up to a more conversational dialogue by asking, who are the most important people in your life? And does your relationship with them affect any of your financial decisions? Because that is going to get to her most important relationships broadly, right? And you may even learn how she may use her wealth on those relationships and who she trusts or does not trust with it. Now, while thankfully no one has ever said to me, women no less than men, I've had countless financial interactions when the person helping my husband and me spends the majority of the time speaking to my husband instead of speaking to me. I cannot stress this one enough. It is so important to be mindful about spending time directing your words and your eye contact equally among men and women during meetings and conversations. When you are conversing with a joint household or with multiple people in the room, especially if you have disengaged members, right? I get asked a lot, how do I engage a disengaged spouse? The first question I ask back is, how are you engaging him or her, right? We are most disengaged when we feel left out of a conversation. This is true for anyone. Research still shows that in most mixed gender conversations, over 60% of the eye contact goes to the man. I can tell you it usually feels like 80% if you're on the receiving end. Now, it's hard for us to retrain our unconscious, but we need to think about things we can do to proactively combat what we know tend to be unconscious biases, right? Making sure that eye contact, your body language, your questions are directed equally among women and men is a good practice to have in any situation. This is including educational meetings for participants, internal work meetings that you may be having with other colleagues, because what you are doing is you are creating a sense of involvement and inclusion and responsibility for everyone present, right? Not just the most vocal. Now, no research has ever shown that women need simplified information. Simply not true. As an industry, though, we do need to do a better job when it comes to reaching those that have different learning styles or maybe different investment priorities than we do or we think they should have, okay? For example, I'm a visual learner and I'm an auditory learner. I am not a reading, writing learner. So I can personally vouch that oftentimes not being that type of learner has made it unnecessarily difficult in this industry, given so much of what we consume in financial services has historically been through the written word. Now, providing personal examples or analogies, that can be really helpful. Visuals or videos, or creating or recommending podcasts. Vivid imagery, that's a big one too. That's going to work really well for visual consumers and learners. So asking someone to visualize themselves, right, 15, 20 years from now, and asking them to be very descriptive in telling you what they're doing, who they are with, what they are thinking about, what they are talking about, what they see, what they smell, what they're planning for the coming week, right? Putting them in that situation, right? When they are maybe in retirement, having them go forward in time and be really descriptive about what they are seeing and hearing, that's a powerful tool for visual consumers of information. If you're trying to get someone to change behaviors or habits in the present, or get them to act now in the present for something in the future, right? Also, more often than not, if it is me and another man that's walking into a meeting or hosting a meeting, the assumption is made that he's more senior and that he's the expert. So what does that look like? People will go for his hand first for introductions, even when I'm a foot from them and he's across the room. People will spend more time getting to know him in the introductory small talk. And then when we finally sit down for the meeting, right, their whole body is facing my male colleague, and I literally feel like I'm a power forward in the NBA finals getting boxed out at the foul line. Now, I do believe that 9 out of 10 times this was unconscious. I don't believe every man or woman that has done that to me believes that I couldn't have been the expert. But regardless of their intentions, their actions sent this clear message, right? There was a narrative in their head, and their actions displayed that falsehood. Not being a bit more mindful of how your unspoken actions are coming across to a client or a prospective client could really cost you that valuable relationship, and you genuinely might not even know that your actions came across that way. Now, listen is an anagram for silent, right? Every individual, they want to be heard, they want to feel seen, and in order to feel heard, that other person has to be an active listener. So if I walk out of a meeting where I talked less than 30% of the time, I learned a lot about that other person, right? And their unique needs. I learned about their professional and their personal goals, their hopes, their dreams, their fears. Besides using my body language and eye contact, visual cues to let the person know that I am actively listening, it's perfectly acceptable that we just take the time and ask, I want to make sure I understand you correctly, and then kind of repeat what we think we learned and what we think our expectations, the expectations that they have for us are, right? Just take that extra moment to make sure that we aren't missing anything that maybe isn't being said with words, but that is coming across in how she might be delivering that information to you. Now, 54% of women say they are the primary breadwinners in their family as of today, right? So given the demographic shift that is upon us, of course, there very well and will be some inherited wealth, but we cannot and should not be making these assumptions. So this past spring, for example, I was doing a lot of work in our yard, and a neighbor stopped by to compliment how nice it looked, which was really incredibly kind of her. But then she said, Laura, I ran into your husband yesterday while he was walking Rocky, so Rocky's our dog, and he said that you're going to be on Cape Cod for a few more months before going back to San Francisco. It's just amazing that you're able to split time between San Francisco and Cape Cod. You're so lucky. What does your husband do for work? Now, this is the face that I wanted to make, but my mama taught me better. So I smiled and I said, he's in financial services. But what I really wanted to say was, oh yes, because it's only by my husband's grace that we got here in life. I mean, if 54% of women consider themselves the primary breadwinner in their household, statistically speaking, that neighbor would be wrong and making that wrong assumption over half the time. Right? Now, when someone makes this assumption, even indirectly, I have to admit I have limited capacity for forgiveness on this one. And I've actually reflected why this one in particular makes my blood boil as it does for so many women. And I think in personal reflection and in talking that out with others, I think it's because when this assumption is made, you're really essentially disregarding the work someone put in, the sacrifices that were made to earn every penny of it. My family, my relationships are of the utmost importance to me. So when this assumption is made, you're disregarding every birthday I was late to, every weekend plan I canceled, every night with family, friends, or my husband I sacrificed in order to study for a designation I pursued, right? And those weren't decisions that I made lightly. And I can tell you that if my neighbor was instead a prospective advisor that I had that exchange with, I would smile and I would answer politely, right? Just like I did to my neighbor, just like my mom taught me. And I'd keep up my search for an advisor that did not make that assumption, right? But instead asked those conversational questions, got to know me. And if it is a joint relationship, got to know me and my husband as individuals and as a unit. Now, we all need to work towards using more of the intelligence that we gather instead of our intuition and really help others on our teams, within our firms, do the same, because every member of our team, of the experience that a client has working with us in our organizations, represents all of us, right? In a given relationship with a client, and also represents us as an industry, right? Now, transactional questions, that's an important bridge to thwarting unconscious bias. All too often, the questions that we are asking our clients and prospective wealth clients during maybe some of our discovery meetings, right, or conversations that we're having, a lot of those are inherently biased, and they do make assumptions that don't statistically even make sense to make. Now, we want to move past that surface level and get to the heart of her purpose, her goals, right? So we can create that client experience that is going to be empowering and meaningful. And when women engage with us, it's important to recognize that they're going to want that social, intellectual, emotional, and financial outcome that rivals or outweighs just per performance, right? Specifically, there needs to be this process that we have for linking a client's purpose and values and life goals with their investing strategy. And conversational, not transactional or factual questions is going to help us get there. Now, our expertise, our performance, right? That may not matter if we aren't focused on one's unique needs and what's most important to that individual. So why aren't we just asking her to define that with a question like, you know, when you think about the role I'd play in partnering with you on your financial journey, how do you envision that partnership? What does that look like for you? Because that's going to allow us to just ever so slightly customize that client experience based on what's most important for her. Now, another important topic, right, is how you speak, the language you use. That can actually affect the way women approach their finances and the decisions that they feel empowered to make. Now, in normal conversation, many women tend to use relatively positive language cues. This approach can create a sense of support, confidence, a feeling of openness towards decision making, right? However, our industry tends to use language that many women, you know, may perceive as negative about risk, downside, volatility. Because many women tend to focus on the fear of losing money if they aren't properly educated or coached, an approach that seems negative to them may make women feel they should pull back or avoid a perceived risk that may seem benign to us as financial professionals. Now, this is not to say that women don't want the unvarnished truth. It simply suggests the approach and the way in which we communicate that really matters. Now, there's actually writing platforms that can scan for the gender tone of the language that's being used in a communication or a job posting, key phrases that are statistically likely to change the gender balance of your communication. So studies have been done where changing the words or the phrasing in a job posting, for example, led to a more gender balanced applicant pool. One example I like to give is the phrase driven by, okay? This tends to have a more masculine tone, okay? But by changing this to inspired by, your meaning actually stays rather consistent, right? But the gender tone changes to elicit more positive response from women. So there are these writing platforms and really just an exploration of these language cues. That's something tangible that you could leverage if you think this is an area that you can improve upon in those communications that you're sending out to your clients. Now, one study found that advisors committed an average of 10 gender-based miscues in a 30-minute meeting, and while male advisors were almost twice as likely to commit the communication miscue, women advisors were absolutely by no means immune. So our industry, right, at its core is built on trust. People aren't just entrusting us with their money, right? They're entrusting us with their hopes, their dreams for themselves and their loved ones. Right? How can we really build relationships that are built on trust if we don't get to know each other as individuals on a personal level? See, building benevolence trust with women investors has been shown to be just as important, if not even more important, than credibility trust. So that means we should be sharing more of ourselves on our websites, our landing pages, in the meetings, in our office space, right? Women tend to crave this conscious connection at the human level, not just the business level. Now, of course, getting to know someone as an individual builds trust, and this is true for both men and women. But for women, the relationship itself has been shown to be valued even more often than the financial approach you take or the performance you generate. Now, I have to admit, when someone tells me, Laura, I've tried, but she's just not interested in meeting, my brutal answer is, well, you simply aren't trying hard enough, okay? She may have a capacity issue and feels like she just doesn't have the time, right? So find out how you can carve out some of that capacity. Maybe it's proposing an early call or a later call, right? When she doesn't have a million things on her mind that she's juggling in real time. And if it's an in-person meeting that you really need, right? Maybe propose going to where she's going to be. That possibly means, you know, meeting outside of your office space and more in her comfortable spaces. Now, if you are working with joint relationships, or you're trying to expand maybe a retirement plan relationship into an overall wealth relationship between spouses, maybe you have to stress the importance of her involvement from the beginning and making sure, you know, what you are discussing in those meetings are really engaging for her too. And if you are being met with a lot of resistance in moving a relationship forward, it might mean you might need to go deeper, right? Find one of those things that really energize her, her true passions in life. Maybe that's a cause, a family pet, a love of travel, or maybe that's a hobby that you both enjoy that you might share, right? Find what you genuinely have in common. Find a way to connect over that passion in a meaningful way to build a connection that is going to extend beyond the business relationship. Most women in the research have shown a preference to invest in outcome-oriented strategies designed for their goals, right? They tend to want to create meaning by investing in causes they care about or ideas that could benefit their networks or society more broadly. So if you have opportunities for broader wealth planning with a given client, thinking through how you might be able to integrate charitable conversations or societal impact conversations can go a long way with engagement. It's actually been demonstrated that in all income categories, female-headed households were more likely to give, with baby boomer women in the top income bracket giving 156% more than men. So integrating some of those maybe donor advised fund conversations or just charitable giving, asking about charitable giving as part of your wealth strategy, if the opportunity arises, given your practice, that can be a bigger differentiator if your practice allows you to do so. Now, I know that not all of you may have the time commitment for something like this or to be set up to do this at the organizational level, but I did want to share some findings from a study with Cerulli of top advisors that work with women investors. So they shared that some of the highest engagement from their clients came when they did multi-generational events, specifically educationally geared events that are going to kind of combine that financial, social, and sometimes emotional aspect. Something maybe like a college planning day for parents and kids, financial literacy for teens and young adults. And this could be done virtually too, in the form of possibly offering a virtual financial game night or college planning night. Now, I know I don't need to tell you, right, how referrals can generate higher growth and revenue potential for one's practice. That's a given. The majority of advisors that we're speaking to that have been growing organically attribute that growth, right, to the strong referral culture that they've kind of curated, either within their practice, within their firms. Now, even when a client is an extremely loyal and a big fan of a particular advisor or firm, asking for a referral can kind of feel disingenuous sometimes, right? The art of the referral, right? The true art of the referral has nothing to do with asking for it, but really finding these genuine commonalities between yourself and a client and ultimately finding just small moments to make meaningful, impactful, and memorable touches. Now, not only are women 25% more likely to make referrals, but they are more likely to have made a purchase based on referral as well. I like to think about this as kind of compounding at its finest. So let me give you an example of this in action and the power it can have on your practice, especially if you activate and inspire female clients. So my husband and I, we refinanced our home back in 2021, along with a good chunk of the country, I'm sure. And I had mentioned we were thinking about refinancing to 3, maybe 4 male friends. Now, all of these friends had recently refinanced their home, and they told me the rate they got, but no one really voluntarily referred me to who they used. Now, I mentioned it to one female friend in passing conversation, and she basically jumped through the phone talking about her guy, how I got to call him, right? Now, within minutes, of getting off the phone with her, I had an email introduction from her introducing me to him. And then even from my first call to this mortgage specialist, he did everything right from a service standpoint, right? He was responsive. He took time to answer my questions, never rushed me off the phone. And that type of client service is table stakes at this point. But what stood out the most was that when we got the paperwork for closing, my name was on the paperwork first, followed by my husband's. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but since I got married over 8 years ago, nothing has had my name first. And I handle all of our finances. When we bought a car, I did all the talking, all the negotiating. His name was first on the paperwork. When we bought our condo in San Francisco, I handled 90% of it. He was tied up in a big work project, but somehow his name ended up first, right? And don't get me started on taxes. Even though I contribute more than my fair share financially to our partnership, he's the primary taxpayer and I'm the spouse. So when I saw my name finally first on any document, it mattered to me. It was memorable and it stood out. Now, since we closed, right, now we're pushing on almost 3 years, I have referred him to about 16 people. Now, all of those 16 have done some business with them, either refinanced or bought a home, first-time home, and 10 of those 16 have referred him to other people. And all 10 of that second generation referral were also women. So how you treat, you engage, you empower and activate your female client base is going to lead to a long-lasting referral source if you get it right. So to meet this demographic imperative head on, let's talk about some practice strategies that we can really think about to help drive greater engagement with a more diverse set of clients. So besides learning from the hard data, right, learning from peers, I think was equally as important. So as I mentioned, we did a study with Cerulli Associates in 2022 to help really understand advisor best practices in working with women. And I think the most salient point that came out of these qualitative interviews was that in order to effectively work with women clients, advisors needed to be deliberate about it. And there were 4 areas that really stood out in how these advisors were deliberate about their strategy in achieving success with women investors. Now, what we learned was that advisors who specialized in working with women tended to cultivate certain qualities to really guide the client experience. And the first was an authentic approach and a commitment to women. And they described that authentic approach as the client needing to know that you care about them and why you care about them. And the participants also talked a lot about how an authentic approach involves making those clients feel comfortable, right, to share their inner thoughts and fears. And this had implications on where they suggested to meet, who was present in those meetings, and how they actually conducted and facilitated those meetings. There was also a big emphasis by these advisors on philanthropic contributions to the communities that they lived and worked in, with a lot of these advisors, talking about, the work that they do on their bios and LinkedIn. And a lot of these advisors were involved with local women's events, advocated for women's causes, or volunteered with nonprofit women's groups, specifically on things like financial education. Now, participants also talked about becoming experts in what a specific segment of women clients want and need by focusing on life stage, profession, and interests. People think women are a niche market. I mean, for goodness sake, we're over half the population, and we are most certainly a formidable force in the labor market. Women going through a divorce, though, single career-oriented women, stay-at-home, dual parents, working parents, recent widows, they will all want, and in most cases need, different client experiences, content, approaches. And these advisors had a clear picture and an understanding of who they serve best and why, and really focus their efforts more on engaging and developing that kind of ideal client profile. And then the third overarching theme from the study was these advisors embodied an educational mindset. And I don't just mean asking for questions at an end of a meeting, right? But actually creating space right? Where clients and prospects feel comfortable and open to ask questions. Oftentimes, education and providing a space where women can learn together and have a sense of community can be a valuable means of engagement too. Several of these advisors we spoke with during the study had dedicated content that they were sending to their women investors about specific needs and helpful resources focused on content that resonates and tend to be top of mind for women. And then the last theme that was really present in these interviews was practicing inclusive collaborative communication, right? A focus on, addressing some of those unconscious bias and being deliberate about their eye contact and their body language, because really, especially with female clients, relating well is often about cooperation and partnership, connection, and communications. Now, as we kind of take a look at what we know now and make an even greater impact with female investors, let's think about, this as a multi-pronged approach. And really the first prong is focused on targeted communication and content, right? So is there a way for you to either create content or disseminate content specifically focused on topics that tend to be top of mind for women? So some of the content that came out of the study, the participants talked about, content like talking to aging parents about money, working through grief and loss, caregiving considerations, raising money-wise kids, the financial impacts for women when going through a divorce, college planning, charitable giving, right? Those are topics that tend to resonate even more so with female audiences. Are there ways that you could think about fostering a community for your participants and clients by finding ways to sustain and continue engaging and growing that community? When women engage with us, again, they want social, intellectual, emotional, and financial outcomes that rival or outweigh pure performance metrics. So we need to be providing those channels for them to do so. And then, we're all lifelong learners, right? Continually training and coaching yourself on emotional intelligence and connection is critical. Some of the most diverse advisory firms, the most successful advisors that we've spoken with, they're really committed to things like unconscious bias training and other sensitivity training. And then working towards a more diverse team and a more diverse network over time. That's another way you can move the needle, regardless of whether you are directly involved in hiring members of a team you might be working with. Each of you can personally help the pipeline on a larger scale. Internships, mentorship, financial literacy in the community, joining groups as an ally to meet new people, hearing new perspective. Not all women have a preference to work with a female advisor, but it is well documented that most people are put at ease when they see a part of themselves represented in the person that they're doing business with. Now, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but so much boils down to kind of customizing communications. So next time you think about writing a communication to clients, participants, right, prospective, wealth clients, right, that you're courting, try asking yourself a series of questions in every communication you put out, and pretty soon it's going to be second nature. Am I being inclusive and representative of the clients I work with and want to be working with? Am I balancing my desire to focus on the returns of the investments with the values those investments might symbolize to them? Am I providing enough opportunities for those that have been less engaged with their investments to engage in a way, that might be more comfortable for them? And what can I be doing to make them more comfortable? Segmentation is also important in any practice, but so many times we focus on assets instead of behaviors, which especially for women, I think is just a miss, because segmenting by behaviors or thinking more specifically about behaviors, life stage or household situation, that's going to create more meaningful connections and engagements, right? The arc of a woman's life can shift priorities and needs rather quickly, so it's important for us to feel we are paying attention to those distinct experiences and the joys and fears that come along with them, right? Your emotional impact on your participants, on your clients will expand exponentially, and so won't your relationship with them. Now, in the interest of time, I want to focus a little bit on this last slide here. It's interesting, it's probably interesting to you, right, that someone who focuses on investments in her day-to-day saves the conversation on risk to the end, but it's because risk is one of the most important topics to not only address, but to be thoughtful in the way you address it. As an industry, we need to stop assuming women are more risk averse. Further research has shown that women just need just need more information because they tend to be more calculated risk takers than men. Women tend to invest for the long term, invest based on facts, right? Not their gut. That's a calculated risk taker. And if we think more critically about how we position investing and the framing we use surrounding investing, the collective impact we can have is endless. To tie this back to my personal story at the beginning, I'm not a gambler. Literally makes me sick to my stomach the thought of losing money, okay? I played roulette once at a conference in Las Vegas. I lost $60 in less than a minute. I have never gambled since. Yet if you looked at my current allocation to equities and fixed income, it wouldn't reflect that same appetite for risk, regardless of market volatility. You'd think my appetite was aggressive. But generally, if someone asked me if I was risk averse, my answer would be yes, because I'm comparing my hesitancy to take risks to someone else's lack of hesitation in that same scenario. But I love calculated risk. I've scaled the Sydney Bridge, gone shark diving in South Africa, never miss an opportunity to zip line across a tree line, okay? But I'm petrified of heights and sharks, just like I hate losing money. But I just do my homework on the risk of injury in those situations, the precautions the company's taking, right? We need to give our female clients the tools they need to do their homework to make sure they're comfortable in taking the risks that we know they might need to take in order to fulfill their goals. Right? Now, I know I covered a lot in a short amount of time, and I do hope this was helpful in kind of sparking some additional ways we as an industry can better serve the needs of female investors, because it is our duty to start making investing inspirational, accessible, and actionable for all, really, you know, in a way that's going to excite them and not deter them. And we do want to support your efforts in any way we can. And we have a number of advisor workbooks and investor workbooks that I provided to Chris, and he said he uploaded them in the handout section to make those available to all of you. But we have a ton of great information on our website as well, schwabassetmanagement.com/women-investing. I did just want to kick it back to Ian before I close out here to see if we might have a question or two. But I'm also happy to continue to engage with all of you over email or LinkedIn if questions or thoughts may arise in the coming days and weeks. Would love to continue the conversation. So Ian, I'll see if we have any questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. We'll open the floor here for a few minutes, and if you do have a question, please enter it into the question panel.
And Ian, maybe while we're oh, please, yes.
One thing I was just going to comment on, and looking at the investor profile, I was thinking about my wife, who fits all of those traits, and I would say on paper, admittedly, that she's probably a more desirable wealth management client.
Thank you for the honesty, Ian. I appreciate that. It is true. I mean, everything I'm presenting, you know, is based on research. This isn't meant to be, you know, a feel-good conversation. This is really all based on research and the growth trajectory of our client base and our industry. And you know, I don't know if your you know, wife is like many women I talk to, but even with all those innate traits, there's still this kind of lack of confidence and lack of wanting to engage, just because they need someone to kind of reach out that hand to make them feel a little bit more comfortable, right? So I'm hoping what I've shared today, you know, provides some good ideas for people to help, you know, reach that hand a little bit further, a little bit more deliberately, to engage a little bit more thoughtfully, especially with our women clients. Because I truly do believe in the research supports that it will pay us in spades to do so as a society, as an economy, and as an industry.
Absolutely. One question, Laura. Do you have any suggestions for advisors for activities maybe in their local community to engage with women investors?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of communities have women's clubs, women's organizations. I would highly recommend, whether you are a male advisor, a female advisor, however you identify, I would say build connections with those groups, right? A lot of them are really seeking diverse membership, those that bring different expertise to the table. And most certainly, I think, financial education, financial expertise, partnership there is one way to engage with the community. And that's true for a profit like a club or nonprofit organizations as well. Because again, because women are looking for kind of that multi-dimensional relationship with you, not just financial. I think if you're able to get to know broader networks through more diverse organizations like that, where maybe you might not typically belong to, I think that's a great way to expand your network and build relationships with larger groups of women in the communities that they feel, and the organizations and the spaces that they feel most comfortable in, right? So I think that's a great way to kind of boots on the ground in your local communities, doing a bit more.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I do want to just one more friendly reminder. Don't forget to fill out that CE survey that Chris provided in the reminder email, as well as in the handouts area on the technology platform. That's where you're gonna just input that CFP or CIMA numbers to get the CE credit. I'm just warning you now, don't come crying to me tomorrow if you didn't fill it out, because I do need those end of day today, and my 10-month-old gets all my crying sympathy. So if you don't do it today, I won't be able to help you tomorrow. So please, I promise you it'll take you 60 seconds. First, middle, last name, email. Did you learn anything from this presentation? And then you're all set in your credentials. So just a friendly reminder.
Well, thank you again, Laura. And thank you to everyone for joining us here on this edition of Epic Insight. As a reminder, we will be sending out summary handouts and a recording of today's presentation as a follow-up. Also, please do not hesitate to contact us if there's anything that your Epic sales team can do to support you and your prospecting efforts. Thank you again, and we look forward to having you join us for the upcoming edition of Epic Insight.
Thanks so much.